Thank you so much, guys. It is so thrilling to be here. I have got so involved in L&G Shakers over the past few months, and I'm just thrilled to get to know you all a little bit better and have some fun together today. So thank you so much for joining. I'm absolutely delighted. So what you'll need for today is preferably a pen and paper. So if you don't have a pen and paper, go and grab the back of an envelope and a piece of chalk or charcoal, although we're not in the 1900s, but something so that you can take notes if you would like to. If you don't have a pen and paper, just do what you got to do to make this work for you. So if you like the look of any of the slides that you see today, please feel free to take a screenshot. And for bonus points, we would love it if you'd share this on social media to help share the amazing work that Anna Maria and the team at L&D Shakers are doing to help spread some of this badass unicorn magic. And I'm even offering one free coaching session for 60 minutes one-to-one with me to my favorite social media post about today. So if you'd like to share, we would be absolutely thrilled if you would do so. And there's a little incentive for you to do it as well. So we are recording, as Anna Maria said. I won't mention anybody's last names. There may be an opportunity at the end to go into breakout rooms. You're not recorded in those, so you can speak completely freely. But do just be aware that we are recording today. But please keep your cameras on if you're comfortable to do so, because it makes us feel like we're all actually in this virtual room together. And I've got a bunch of L&D folks in the room, so you guys know how important it is to give sessions their full attention in order to get the most out of them. So if you can do yourself a favor, the group a favor, and me a favor, silence those snacks, turn over that phone so you don't see the WhatsApps coming through, don't try and double screen, and just give yourself the next 50 minutes to think about yourself and your personal growth and the imposter that you want to get rid of, because we're going to be working on that today. So like Anna Maria said, I gave this workshop just 2 weeks ago. I've been giving it a lot, and this is just some of the feedback that I've been getting. Best webinar I've ever been to, most actionable webinar. It was fantastic. You made us feel like we're not alone. I'm not here showing off. I'm just letting you know that this is extremely impactful, but what makes it most impactful is you. So the best responses I get is when people are engaged and participating and using the polls and on the chat and being supportive, and we feel this kind of collective energy, this collective dynamism. So if you want to create some magic, if you want to recreate some of the incredibly electrifying spaces that you've been to with keynotes before, then bring everything you've got, and I'm going to bring everything I've got, and let's saucer up some magic together. So who am I? My name is Alice. I'm the type of woman that dresses her child up as a mascot for her business. You can see her there on the right, but I run a training company called Badass Unicorn, and I get to work with some incredible clients. I still pinch myself every day. Gusto, Ocado, Bloom and Wild, Bumble, Graze, Deliveroo, and I just signed Tesco for International Women's Day, which is absolutely huge. Hopefully some of you have heard of Tesco. I'm still buzzing from it. So I actually spent 10 years working in marketing before pivoting over to the L&D world because I fell in love with personal development. I had it as a side hustle for a while, and 3 years ago, I went full time to be a badass unicorn. And what I want you to take away from this slide really is that thousands of people have been through my workshops, and I get an average feedback score of 9 out of 10. So I really hope I'm going to blow your socks off today, and there'll be a feedback link at the end. And I'd love to hear your constructive criticism. It's not often I get a bunch of L&D folks on the room, and also, support about ways that I can make these even more badass. So what's today going to cover? So first of all, we're going to define what the hell imposter syndrome is, although from the looks of the chat, you've got a good idea. And we're going to explore why it exists, where it comes from, and how it both helps and hinders us. We're then going to look at your archetype. This is a common manifestation, common characteristics of your imposter coming to life. And then we're going to make friends with our imposter. We're going to get to know your triggers. We're going to think about the things that you say to yourself. And all importantly, we're going to figure out the things that we can say back. So imposter syndrome, as you talked about in the chat, not feeling good enough, feeling unworthy, intellectual fraud, fear, anxiety, that inner critic, that voice in your head, you got it spot on. Now, the definition of imposter syndrome is an experience of inadequacy that persists despite evident success. So this isn't, I've just started a brand new job and I'm day one and I'm shitting myself, because that's kind of normal for us to feel imposter syndrome. It's despite the fact that we've got the accolades to prove it, the trophies in the cabinet, we still feel that we're not good enough, like we're going to get found out. And I think this cartoon on the right basically sums up the concept perfectly. And it was developed by two psychologists in the 70s called Clance and Eames, who identified that in this group of really high achieving, high performing women, they noticed this phenomenon, this strange idea that they didn't feel good enough, that they didn't feel worthy, that they were constantly worried that they were going to get found out. And so the name Imposter Syndrome was born. Now, I'm going to talk to you now about some of the symptoms of imposter syndrome. And as I go through, what I'd love for you to do, share in the chat, which of these are things that you experience? Perhaps you experience all 5 of them, so you might say full house, but please volunteer and share in the chat about which of these are things that you associate with your imposter syndrome. So, symptom number 1 is a chronic sense of self-doubt. Are you one of those people that's constantly second guessing yourself, that's worried that you're not going to do a good enough job, that while you're doing a task is constantly saying, oh, I'm not doing it right, I must be getting something wrong, or you're quite scared about putting it forward because you feel like it's not good enough? Are you constantly doubting and questioning yourself and feeling unsure about your self or your capabilities? Let me know if that sounds like a symptom of yours. And remember, the more that you share, the more the rest of the group are going to share. So please be generous in your sharing and let's create this amazing space together. Do you identify with a sense of intellectual fraud? Do you sometimes feel like you're going to get found out, like you don't deserve to be here, like, oh, I must have got that job by chance or luck, or they're going to realize that I'm actually not right for what I'm doing? A sense of intellectual fraud is a really common characteristic of imposter syndrome. Let me know in the chat if this is something that you experience. Now, the next one is something that you might not typically associate with imposter syndrome. Are you one of those people who has difficulty recognizing praise or proof of competence? Are you one of those people when someone says, hey, so-and-so, you did such a good job, and you think, no, they can't be talking about me, they must be making it up, or they're just being nice? Or you say, oh no, but so-and-so actually did all the work and I barely did anything. Does that sound like you? Or are you someone who struggles to except when somebody says that you're doing a good job, you think, no, they must be lying, or they're just saying it to be nice? Does this sound like you? Looks like from the chat, this is something that a lot of you are resonating with. Next up is berating your performance, which is a major, probably the biggest one for me. Berating your performance, never feeling like you can meet your own high expectations, feeling just giving yourself such a hard time when there's a typo in the email, or you've stumbled over your words in a presentation, beating yourself up for any little mistake. Does that sound like something you do, like me? And fear is another big one. We talked about fear in the chat, a fear you won't meet your own expectations, a fear you won't meet the team's expectations, the idea that you're going to let people down. So let's have a look in the chat. What are people saying? Definitely number 4, always doing this, berating performance and self-doubt for me. Okay, there's another one. Not enough for myself. Yes. Brilliant, gang. So sounds like quite a few people have got similar ones here, letting people down, all of the above. Yeah, if you've got a full house, unfortunately, I don't have any gold stars. But what's great about this is now you understand what some of the symptoms are of your imposter syndrome. You can start to recognize when it rears its unhelpful head. So thanks so much for getting so involved in the chat. But hang on a second. The definition of imposter syndrome is a feeling of inadequacy that persists despite evident success. So what happens when your success is questioned? What happens when, the shit hits the fan and you've got a reason to question why you're successful? Despite evident success, doesn't apply, right? For example, I saw something that happened to me that gave me massive imposter syndrome. Was I was demoted. I was working at Deliveroo. I was scaling the international marketing team. I was leading European marketing for the company. And they brought someone directly in above me to run the team that I've been running for 2 years. If you think that would hurt, I want you to put an ouch or a yes or a oh in the comments for me, right? It was one of the most earth-shattering career crises of my entire life. I never had a worse moment than getting that phone call and going home and crying to my mum with 3 bottles of rosé and snot pouring down my face. You know, the tears when you're like, why has this happened, right? Didn't feel very successful then, did I? So what, does the imposter just have loads of fodder to feed on then? Clearly not evidently successful. In you go, imposter. And what about when you face another type of career crisis like redundancy? Put a yes in the chat for me if you've ever been at risk of redundancy or experienced this. It's something that we don't talk about, but it's so important to share. Redundancy doesn't scream successful, does it? Oh, so, okay, imposter, go to town, have fun. I'm just a complete and utter failure. And what about when you're in your scary zone? You lose all idea of evident success. Like right now, I'm in my scary zone presenting what I know is a really kick-ass presentation. evident success, but to a whole load of L&D professionals who are really good at exactly what I'm doing now. Hello, imposter, how are you? See what I'm saying? So despite evident success for me feels a little bit one-dimensional in our reflection on imposter syndrome. So I prefer this take, and a lot of people like to take a screenshot of this slide. Imposter syndrome is an experience of inadequacy that unfairly warps your self-worth. It's those moments when all the successes, all the trophies, all the triumphs go out the fucking window and you just can't see the wood from the trees, but all you can hear is that negative inner voice telling you you're not good enough, that you don't belong to be here, that you're a failure, that you're a fuck up, that you're all of those things. So this is how I want us to think about imposter syndrome. Now, I'm going to launch a poll. Would love to get a sense from the people in today's virtual room of how often you experience imposter syndrome. Do you never experience imposter syndrome? Do you rarely experience imposter syndrome? Less than once a month? You sometimes experience imposter syndrome, that's kind of monthly, regularly, we're talking weekly, or all the time, daily. Spoiler alert, I'm in the daily camp. So don't be embarrassed if you're in the daily camp too, because you're in good company. So fabulous. We've had 75% of you participate so far. Seems like loads of you are engaged. We've really got the room here. 86% of you coming back, 90% now. 3, 2, 1. And I'm going to close the poll. But before I do, what do you think is the most common answer? Drum roll, please. Feel free to share in the chat if you want to have a guess. The most common answer was regularly at 42%. So almost half of this group are experiencing this weekly, monthly coming in second at 36%. We have a grand fat 0 for never experiencing imposter syndrome. And there are 6 out of 36 of you like me who are experiencing this multiple times a day. Now, why do you think I shared this poll at the beginning of the presentation? It's because tip number 1, lesson number 1, the probably most important lesson that you're going to learn for the whole of today is you are not alone when you feel imposter syndrome. The chances are when you're sitting there doubting yourself in a meeting, so's your boss, so's your partner, so's your line report, so's your best friend. And when we realize that we're not alone in experiencing this, when we realize that we're one of many, when we realize that we're not some freaking weirdo for feeling feelings like this, it can really help to recognize that we are not alone, that we're all in this together, and that we are absolutely part of a bigger majority. I think it's really interesting and perhaps slightly self-selecting since you've joined an imposter syndrome session, but pretty much, 95% of this room are saying that they're experiencing this with fairly frequent action. All right, brilliant. Lovely work, everybody. Thank you so much for participating in the polls. You guys are making this awesome. So let's get going with talking a bit more about what your imposter could be doing to help you. So I know this is a strange idea. How could your imposter be helping you? I'd love for you to share in the chat any ideas about how your imposter might be doing you a favor. What might you have your imposter to thank you for? How's your imposter making your life better, generating positivity in your life? Would absolutely love to hear in the chat your thoughts about what concepts, ideas, thoughts may you have about how your imposter could be helping you. So Crystal saying, maybe bring out some curiosity, keeping it real, planning for success, helping me to continuously learn, keeping me safe from scary events. It's the scary feeling telling you you're going in the right direction to challenge yourself, pushing me to continuously become better, humble, relying on my team, shows that I care about the subject, keeps me vulnerable. You guys absolutely nailed it. Bringing more empathy towards the other. Yes, fantastic. Love all these. Some really interesting perspectives there. Thank you for sharing. So I think you've pretty much nailed all 3 of the points on my slide, which is helpful when you're delivering a workshop like this, as you will all know. So the first thing, a couple of you said that it protects you, it keeps you safe, it makes you check yourself, it stops you from the word vomit that just might pile out of your mouth otherwise. It makes you kind of stop before you just say whatever or do whatever, and it does that to keep you safe. Now, I'm not here to give you a science lesson, and I'm sure lots of you know this given our background, but we know that we're programmed as pack animals to want to stay as part of the pack. And part of that is not doing anything that might jeopardize our position in the pack. And when we stick our head above the parapet, when we put ourselves out there, We fear ridicule. We fear that we're going to be ostracized. And if you were ostracized in the jungle, you might be killed as not being part of the pack. So this is all part of our kind of like animalistic, the amygdala tendencies, the chimp, if anybody has read the chimp paradox, this is all part of us responding to situations that we see as risky or threats or challenging and fearing about the potential repercussions. So your imposter is there to protect you and keep you safe first and foremost. You also mentioned this. It motivates you to bring your A game. It pushes you. It challenges you to be your best. Have you ever been in the gym and seen someone just going a little bit faster than you in the treadmill or going a little bit deeper than you in one of those yoga poses? And it pushes you to turn up the volume or to stretch just that little bit further. It pushes us. It challenges us. It inspires us to bring more of what of what we're badass about to the world. And lastly, a couple of you said this as well about empathy, showing that you care. It demonstrates how seriously you take something, how much you want to do a good job. If you didn't give a shit, if you couldn't give a monkeys, you wouldn't feel these feelings of imposter syndrome. So actually, I think it's a really altruistic quality to have because it demonstrates that you are humble, empathetic, kind, giving human being. And I've no doubt that that's exactly what everybody is on this workshop today. Brilliant. So I would love for you, if you're up for playing along with me, to just literally give ourselves a hug, our imposter a hug, or if a hug is way too cringe, give yourself a pat on the back and say, thank you, imposter. Thank you for protecting me and keeping me safe. Thank you for pushing me. Thank you for showing me that you care. I'm going to turn on see if I've got any huggers in the room. I can't see any hugging, but maybe I'm not looking at the right people. But if you want to give yourself a pat on the back or you just thought this was way too cringe, then don't worry, we're going to crack on. So now I want to find out from you, how does your imposter hinder you? How does it hold you back? How does it make life difficult for you? In what ways does it make things tricky? Can you pop your answers in the chat for me? How does your imposter hinder you? Anna Maria is saying a self-hug is never cringe. It's a bit Mel Robbins high five, but yeah, I love it too. Anna says it feels odd. Crystal saying about how it hinders you, makes you not want to move forward. Yelena saying procrastination. Yeah, absolutely. How else does it hold you back? How else does it hinder you? Missed opportunities set due to fear. It sometimes stands in the way of fulfilling ideas. Missed opportunities, self-doubt, keeps me from starting challenging tasks. Selling myself short, takes lots of energy. Yes, Sadie, I couldn't agree more. Not speaking out, exactly, everybody. Lowers confidence, keeps me from promoting myself. Awesome responses in the chat, everybody. Thank you so much for coming forward with those. So let's talk about this now. Exactly as you said, it holds you back. Put a yes in the chat for me if you've ever stopped yourself from speaking up in a meeting because your imposters chimed in. Put a yes in the chat for me if you haven't gone for a promotion because your imposter told you that you weren't good enough, or for a pay rise for that matter. Put a yes for me if you haven't applied for a job description or for a job because you didn't meet 150,000% of the criteria and your imposter was just going to town on it. I've got lots of yeses and sharings in the chat. Exactly. It threatens us from backing ourselves. It stops us from doing what we're capable of. It makes us procrastinate, and it's generally just makes life feel a little bit more tricky, doesn't it, about letting ourselves be our brilliant badass best. Next up, it distresses you. Put a yes in the chat for me if you are fed up to fuck of the toxic inner monologue that goes round and round in a loop in your head, because I certainly am. This level of toxicity doesn't belong in my own brain, doesn't belong anywhere. And I just wish sometimes that I could turn it down and change the record completely. So if you're fed up of the distressing inner monologue, then give me a yes or a hell yeah in the chat. And lastly, a little bit more sentimentality here, but it undervalues you. I like to imagine, what would life look like if we saw ourselves from the perspective of someone that loves us? Think about what your partner would say, your mum and dad would say, your friends would say about you. It wouldn't be the horrible, shitty, mean things that the imposter's saying to you, would it? It would be how brilliant you are, how kind you are, how inspiring you are, how bright you are. Imagine if we could see ourselves through the same lens. You wouldn't be friends with this voice in your head if it was an actual person, would you? You tell it to go fuck itself, right? I just wish that we could say goodbye to that voice in our heads. But the good news is we're going to be doing some work on how we can talk back and have a more constructive inner dialogue. So watch this space. So gang, would love for you to input in the chat for me again. What causes imposter syndrome? Where do you think imposter syndrome comes from? What do you think we might have as reasons behind this phenomenon? Got lots of yeses and Hail Marys in the chats from that last exercise. So tell me now, what causes imposter syndrome? Amygdala says mine, exactly. Previous failure, comparing myself to others. Anna also saying comparison. Emily also saying comparison. Jinx there. Past failures is embarrassment. Past traumas and triggers. Brilliant. Keep them coming for me. What causes imposter syndrome? My generation's view on women, regrets, expectations, the way we're raised, comparison, childhood stuff too, past comments made by others. Absolutely, guys. You are totally nailing this. So let's talk about the 4 aspects of attribution that I associate with imposter syndrome. So exactly as some of you said, your physical body, your DNA, your genes, it's widely acknowledged that about 50% of your personality is defined at birth. It's defined by when that egg met that sperm and poof, you came into existence. Now, is this something that we can change? No, we were born this way. And what I mean is there are certain attributes that some of us may have, certain tendencies, certain leanings that we have that may predispose us to experiencing certain conditions like imposter syndrome. For example, you're either born on the introversion spectrum or the extroversion spectrum. So perhaps depending on where you are with this, you may have it that may impact the way you experience imposter syndrome. Another one of these is whether or not you're chilled out, laid back, or quite neurotic and highly strung. Spoiler alert too, my parents were both pretty neurotic and highly strung people. So go figure, I'm quite neurotic and highly strung. And if you're high up on the neuroticism spectrum, is it likely that you might experience imposter syndrome? Yeah, maybe. So think about what that family tree may have helpfully or unhelpfully passed down to you and how that might be affecting your experience of imposter syndrome. And let's talk about mental health here. We know that mental health can have a hereditary line. So for me, is it any surprise that I have generalized anxiety disorder when my mum's been on antidepressants since I was 5 years old and my grandmother before that? No, because this stuff is passed down. So think about your family history, think about the physical you and what attributes might be contributing to your imposter syndrome. And if anything's coming through for you, please do share it in the chat. Now, the next one came through loud and clear on the chat. It's all about the socialization of the human being that we are. If 50% of us is nature, the other 50% of it is nurture. And that's all about conditioning. So, you know, if you had a horrible boss who made you feel like shit, perhaps that's now contributing to your imposter syndrome. Maybe if you lived in one of those households where unless you got an A star, 10 out of 10, you weren't good enough. It wasn't good enough. You got in trouble. Or maybe you were someone that competed as a young kid, and therefore you've got this kind of competitive nature built within you. So whatever it might be, how have you been socialized since a child, young adult, up into your adult self now? Because these form the foundations of how we see the world. So what socializing could be contributing to your experience of imposter syndrome? The next attribution factor I want to talk about is this little noggin here, our brain. Now, put a yes or no in the chat for me now. Have you heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect? This is something that compares how confidence and competence are correlated. Let's have a look. A few yeses, a few nos. So for anybody who doesn't know, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it now. But before I do, let me just ask you, if I was to say, how are confidence and competence correlated? You'd probably think that it was a nice, smooth trajectory like this, a positive correlation of as you get more competent, you feel more confident. But if only things were that easy. So Dunning and Kruger, sorry, I should say, came up with this theory based on their observations of people. And they looked at how competence and confidence were correlated. And what they found was really interesting. They found that actually when you start doing a task or when you start at something, when your competence level is low, you actually have an inflated sense of confidence. This might be because you don't know what you don't know. It might be that the task isn't particularly taxing. It might be that for a lot of people, this might be the beginning of their careers. And so therefore, we have this overinflated sense of how confident we feel about a task. But what's really interesting is as our competency level grows, our confidence level actually dips. And they believe this is because we start to be aware of all of the things that we don't know, aware about how far we've got to go towards mastery. We start looking at others and feeling like we want to, borrow and mimic some of the things that they do that makes them brilliant at that thing. And so our competency level dips before it starts to creep back up. Now, you might think that once your competency level reaches the heady heights, you'd go back to feeling as confident as you did in the early days. But not that easy, my friend. because they also discovered something called the false consensus effect, which is that even when we reach real extreme levels of competency, our confidence never really recovers. And that's because we start to undervalue how good we are at that thing, and we start to overvalue how good somebody else is at that thing. Because the truth is, we can never be perfect. There's always things that we can learn, right, Shakers? And therefore, we constantly feel like there's ways in which we can improve. So ask yourself now, thinking about your competency, thinking about your competence, where do you think you fall on this spectrum, and what relationship might these two things be having for you? Brilliant. So let's go back to our fourth final factor for imposter syndrome. And you guys came through this in the chat, absolutely. So this is about society. This is the way in which we see the world, the pre-ascribed lens that we use to view. So for example, if you're from an ethnic minority background, if you're from a disability, if you're from any marginalized group, there might be a lack of role models for you to look up to who look like you, talk like you, think like you. And that might make you believe that you don't belong. And we have these weird ideas about what success looks like. We think I've got lots of people from around the world here, so I'll use Donald Trump as an example. But we think, Donald Trump on The Apprentice is what success looks like, and what, we should be leading our teams like. And as we know, Shakers, that's all total bullshit. We think that success looks like having the Mercedes-Benz outside and the big job title and the big salary. And therefore, if we don't aspire to those things, or if we don't have those things, perhaps that's going to ask us to question whether or not we deserve to be there, whether or not, in fact, we are an imposter. So lovely. Thank you so much for all of your sharing in the chat, and lovely to see you all bantering with each other. Feels like everybody's having a good time. So we're now going to look at our first proper exercise, and this is your imposter archetype. So an archetype is a common manifestation or common coming to life of common characteristics of certain kind of behaviors, certain types of people. So I'm going to share with you 4 different archetypes. And what I'd love for you to do is, as I'm going through, ask yourself, does this sound like me? And pick 1 or 2 archetypes to be your archetype or your archetype hybrid. All right. So drum roll, please. Do I have, give me a yes in the chat, any perfectionists in the room? This could be your imposter coming to life. Do you have trouble letting go of mistakes? Do you give yourself the hardest time if there's a typo in an email or misformatting something in a presentation? Do you over prepare for meetings? Do you need everything to be just so? If you do, this could be your imposter coming through. This is the idea that if I can just dot every I and every T, if I'm just so perfect that no one can ever criticize me, then no one's going to realize that I'm actually a failure, that I'm really insecure, and that I'm going to get found out. So if this sounds like you, this could be your perfectionist archetype for your imposter syndrome coming through. And this is really important because we can start to recognize this is a coping strategy. Perfectionism is a coping mechanism for us to deal with our feelings of imposter syndrome. And so once we can start to recognize this, we can start to see where our imposter is chiming in and the unhelpful ways that it does this. All right, roll up number 2. Do I have any workaholics in the room? Do I have anybody that works way more than their hours? Do I have anybody who feels pressure to work harder and longer than others? Do I have people that volunteer to do something even though their to-do list is going over 4 pages of A4? Do I have anybody here who struggles to have boundaries and say no? This again could be your imposter coming through. This is the idea that if I can just get through every single thing on my to-do list, if I can just scribble everything else out and tick everything off, if I can just juggle all the balls, if I can just spin all the plates, then nobody's going to be able to criticize me, and I'm not going to be found out. I'm not going to be realized as being an imposter who doesn't deserve to be here. Again, this is a coping mechanism. Workaholism is a coping mechanism for our imposter. All right, next up we have the natural genius. This, by the way, is my primary archetype. So are you somebody who struggles when things are difficult? Do you sometimes look enviously at other people and think, oh my God, I wish I was as good as them. I wish I could just magic a wand like they seem to be able to do and just get everything right. Do you ever feel embarrassed about the path to mastery, or the fact that you can't get something just with a click of the fingers and be brilliant? If you're like me, if you're a natural genius archetype, again, this is us holding ourselves to unrealistic expectations. It's our way of saying, unless I'm brilliant at absolutely everything, unless I'm just a wizard and I can do things with a click of a finger, then clearly my imposter's got something to say and it's got reasons to doubt myself, and people are going to realize that I'm not as good as I think I am. And last but not least, the expert. Do we have any experts in the room? Are you somebody who feels like you need to know it all? Is the hot seat of when you're being asked questions at the end of a presentation by senior stakeholders your idea of a worst nightmare? Are you somebody who wants to always look for new qualifications, asks for reassurance, needs positive feedback quite a lot, because that will reinforce your credentials as an expert? Do we have anybody in the room who won't apply for a job unless they meet 125 million% of the job criteria? If you're somebody who this sounds like, this could again be your imposter coming through. This is again another form of having unrealistic expectations. And when you can't meet those unrealistic expectations, it's proof that the imposter has something to worry about. If I'm not an expert at absolutely everything, have absolutely every answer to every question, then everybody's going to be able to realize I don't know what I'm doing and I'm going to get found out. So what I'd love for you to do now is share your hybrid archetype in the chat. So which is your first and which is your second, or if one of those just sounds most like you, feel free to share that for me now. So we've got people coming back saying that sounds like me. Yep, yes, yes. Let's have a look. So we've got a few perfectionist experts in the room. Natural genius expert, expert workaholic, perfectionist expert, perfectionist, genius expert, perfectionist, perfectionist expert. Can you be all four? I think all four are bringing attention to different manifestations of your imposter syndrome. So I think you can definitely experience any of these, but perhaps you might have a more of a tendency for one or the other. We've got genius expert, perfectionist, workaholic, natural genius, expert. Amazing, gang. Thank you so much for sharing. So what I hope is just by sharing these archetypes, you can be like, oh, I'm a perfectionist natural genius. And the reason that I give myself a hard time in X, Y, and Z is because this is all part of my imposter syndrome playing out. And when you start to see these unhelpful behaviors, the perfectionism or the workaholicism, definitely not saying that right, but you get my drift, we can start to say, hey, imposter, I see you. I see what you're doing here. And we can start to respond in a different way, should we want to. All right, brilliant. Thank you, everybody. So we're now going to spend the last part of today's session doing a bit of a rebrand. Put a yes in the chat for me if you've ever done a rebrand as part of any of the work that you're doing. If we've got any fellow marketers in the room who've had the pain and pleasure of doing a rebrand, we're going to do a rebrand for the imposter. And I like to call it, as you may have seen from the comms we shared before the session, the shitty committee. A friend of mine told me about this term, and I thought it was absolutely brilliant. It kind of captures the sentiment of the imposter so brilliantly as the shitty committee. So if this serves you, please feel free to use it yourself. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make friends with the shitty committee. So I'd ask you now to get your pen and paper. And if you don't have a pen and paper, just do this in a way that it works for you. And I want you to put it horizontally for me. And I want you to draw 2 lines. So you've got 3 columns. On the right-hand column, I want you to say 1. On the left, I want you to say 2. And on the far right, I want you to put the number 3. All right, so you're drawing something like this. And if you're doing this digitally, then just do what you need to do to try and make this work. All right. Now, what I'm going to give you to do now is I'm going to give you 60 to 90 seconds. We'll see how everyone's progressing and if you need more time to draw or list. Drawing activates the right side of our brain, and we know that that's good for learning, and we know that that's good for creativity. So feel free to draw if you'd like to. List or draw the situations where your shitty committee rears its ugly head. So here are some examples, but this is not a comprehensive list. Perhaps others achieving goals. This is a big trigger for me, is somewhere where the shitty committee starts raising its head for you. Perhaps it's challenges to plan when things don't go right, when things go awry. Perhaps that's a signal for your imposter. Presenting to senior stakeholders is one that comes through thick and fast when I give these workshops. I know that presenting can be something that gives people the absolute heebie-jeebies. Difficult feedback, perhaps. Let me know with a yes or a no in the chat. Anybody got kids in the room? Anyone with kids, I'm sure, has got triggers from them with their imposter syndrome. I certainly do. Or doing something difficult, doing something for the first time. So as I said, this isn't a comprehensive list, but I'm going to give you, let's go with 90 seconds. And if you're finished early, you can let me know to write down or use drawings, situations, triggers for your shitty committee. So you're just, thank you for clarifying, Angela. You're just writing this in column 1, so the far left-hand column. So kind of as I've done on the slide here. Thank you so much for asking the question, because I wasn't clear enough. So hats off to you. Always love a good clarification.
Angela's on the mobile, so that's why she doesn't see the slides. Yeah.
Thank you. Brilliant, everybody. So you've had about half your time now. Clearly, this is not a comprehensive list, but just some thought starters on the slide for you there. We're drawing or writing triggers for our imposter syndrome, the shitty committee, as we like to call them. Awesome. So about 20 seconds left now. And as and when you're ready, if you'd like to share one of the situations that you've written or drawn down, it'd be fantastic to get a sense of what people experience in this fantastic Zoom space today. Fab. So the 90 seconds are up now. Please feel free to share in the chat one of yours. So we've got not being as special as others in my family, public speaking, job interviews. Yeah, that's a big one for people. Not receiving positive feedback, mistakes, grammar one, articulating myself in public speaking, not receiving constructive feedback when someone asks, what do I actually do? Being questioned on my expertise, others around with advanced degrees. Yes, not having all the right answers at the time. Talking to friends I work with about their success, pay, promotions, makes me feel like I'm a fraud if I'm ahead of them. Oh, lovely, Benjamin. Love that one. Brilliant. So keep those answers coming. Some situations shared in the chat now about where the shitty committee comes to life. Seeing everyone announce their new jobs on LinkedIn. Yes, can I have an amen to that? If LinkedIn triggers you and seeing everybody doing amazing success and you feeling like you're a freaking failure. Yes. Not being able to articulate myself the way I want to, providing advice or suggestions to peers. Brilliant, everybody. And I think we've got a lot of agreements there with Deborah on seeing people's job announcements on LinkedIn. So brilliant, gang. You've done lovely work there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to spend 90 seconds again writing down what the shitty committee says to you during those triggering moments. So for example, for me, when I see my friends doing a TED talk or someone with 200 billion gazillion listens on their podcast, I start going in on myself. You're not as good as others. You're not as good as you think you are. Why can't you be more like them? Why can't you be better? Look how good they are. Look how rubbish you are, right? And when things don't go to plan for me, when I don't get the results perhaps that I wanted, or let's say I don't win a piece of work, I'm like, how embarrassing. I should be embarrassed. I should have known I was going to fail. And when my kids trigger my shitty committee, I start going in on myself really negatively. You're a crap mum. You're useless. You know, you're not doing a good enough job. They're going to do really badly at school because you're not good enough. Really not hurtful, horrible things. And when I'm doing something difficult for the first time that I'm really struggling with, that shitty committee is saying things to me like, you're useless, you're rubbish. Of course you're an idiot. Of course you can't use Excel. Of course you can't do a pivot table. You've always been shit at maths, right? So I want you now to write down in column 2, the middle column, what do you say to yourself during these triggering shitty committee situations? Another 90 seconds on the clock, starting now. Natasha saying that their shitty committee comes to life when making dinner with 2 kids under 3. I feel you. I feel you. I'm sure every parent on this call can feel you as well. Amazing work, everybody. Don't second guess yourselves. Don't let the imposter come chiming in with this isn't right. Just allow the words to flow. Just witness your experience. What do you have to put down on the pen and paper now as things that your imposter says? And if this feels difficult or thorny or, you know, sad, kind of connecting with this part of yourself, recognize that this is such an important part of the process. Being able to see what the imposter is saying is the key first step to being able to talk back to it. Great work, everybody. So as and when you're ready, if you'd like to share in the chat with me now, one of the things that you say to yourself would be really fantastic to get a sense of the horrible things that our shitty committee are saying to us. Mothika, I can be replaced. Why? Why do I try? You should have stuck to what you knew and not tried something new. People are judging you. I'm making a bad impression. Why are you here? You're not growing fast enough. Why would anyone listen to me? No one cares. Why do you even bother? Just give up. Someone will find out you're a fraud. You won't make it. Is this right? See, you aren't good enough, right? Now, I'm pretty sure, although I don't know a lot of you directly, that we've got some pretty amazing human beings in this group who've got lots of trophies and accolades and amazing things. Can you believe that this group of people are saying these things to themselves? If I'd asked you to write down all of the things that you're good at, all of the things that you're positive about yourself for, I'm sure that list would have come way easier. So well done to you for going ahead and reconnecting with the shitty committee. So now what we're going to do is we're going to try step 3. And this is in the final right-hand column of your piece of paper. And you know what's coming, gang, because you're L&D folks. We're going to reframe now. We're going to think about what can we say back to the imposter in those moments. Because the key first step to this is about recognizing when the imposter comes in and starting to change the dialogue. So rather than me saying that I'm not good enough when I see other people achieving business success, saying I'm trying my best. And the truth is, if I'm trying my best, what the hell else more can I ask of myself than that? Rather than feeling embarrassed about the fact that I haven't achieved some of those things, perhaps I'm not quite as far forward as I'd like to be, reminding myself about how much I've got to be proud of. You're pinching myself about the fact that I was in negotiations with Tesco this afternoon. Do you know what I mean? Like reminding myself about all the things I can be proud of. And I'm not a crap mum. I'm a brilliant mum. I'm a dedicated mum. And it's okay for my daughter to have a ready meal or a yellow looking meal every now and again. And yes, sometimes you use your temper, but 95% of the time, you're pretty damn fine. All right. And I'm not useless. Failure is part of the process. It's all part of the course to mastery. If you don't fail, you're not trying hard enough, right? So give me your answers back to the shitty committee now. Column 3, what can you say back? Start reflecting and reframing those things from the shitty committee. And when you're ready, please feel free to share those with us in the chat. So Anna's saying, I need more time. You can absolutely have more time to finish it. Hopefully you're going to get a good head start here and you can complete it after the workshop. And Natasha's saying, I'm not there yet. Try again. You always give it your best. My time will come. Beautiful, Deborah. Oh no, this is what I say to the imposter. There you go. I've got myself all muddled up there. Work smarter, not harder. You are awesome and enough. No one cares, right? No one cares. Smart people recognize your value. That's why you got A, Y, and Z. Yeah, take the imposter to court. Take it to court with all the proof points of why it's absolute bullshit. Just keep swimming, says Angela. Confront it, clarify it. You've got this. Gang, you've got this. Absolutely. Brilliant ways to talk back to the shitty committee. Keep those answers coming. Your work does not define your self-worth. Romy, where were you when I needed you about 4 years ago? But eventually I got there. You don't have to be a master. You don't have to master it alone. You are not alone. Beautiful. I remind myself, comparison is the thief of joy. Yes, it is. So what, Diana? Yeah, exactly. So what? Put it into perspective. And what? Mistakes are how you learn and become better. Myself 5 years back would be proud of where I am today. Ain't that the truth, gang? Nothing like looking back at little you and thinking what they would think if they were where you are right now. So brilliant work, everybody. Love all of those reframings. And thank you so much for sharing so openly in the chat. So we're getting towards the end of today. But before I do, I just want to share a few of my top hints and tricks to help you with managing the imposter. But I am not the font of all knowledge. In fact, I've got a whole load of super bright L&D professionals in the room here. So let's share our knowledge. Let's share the learning. So please offer up some of the tips that help you in the chat. And perhaps this tip is going to inspire somebody else. So please offer up whatever works for you in terms of managing the imposter in the chat. It'd be great to use the collective wisdom of this room to do so. We've already got some coming through. Focus on development rather than results. Working with a career coach, says Theo. Yeah, absolutely. Career coach can be absolute game changer for things like this. So my first and number one tip is all about recognition of the imposter. It's about saying, I see you, I hear you. Thank you for trying to keep me safe, but I'm pushing past you. I'm going to feel the fear and do it anyway. But we have to recognize our imposter before we can start to move on from it. Now, the next tip that I have is all about visualizing your imposter. So one of the things I did was after a keynote I watched was draw out my imposter. And what I realized was her name is Alicia. And she's the head cheerleader at Bitchy Girl High School. See how my childhood, I didn't tell you about my childhood trauma, did I? I lost all my friends when I was 15, which is a big part of my imposter syndrome. I feel like I'm going to lose my friends all over again, right? And so, funnily enough, my imposter is called Alicia, and she is the bitchy girls that turned on me when I was losing all my friends at the age of 15. And actually, by giving her a name, by drawing her, by seeing her, it suddenly made me realize that she wasn't so scary. In fact, she wasn't someone to be villainized or demonized. She was actually just this small, vulnerable inner child who felt insecure and felt worried and felt like she was going to be dumped all over again. And so rather than hating her, I felt sorry for her. And now I just want to give Alicia a big hug and tell her that we're okay, that we're doing well, that we're managing, and that our friends aren't all going to turn on us again. It's not, 1998 or whatever year it was that it happened to me, right? I think that's too young, but anyway, you get my drift. So if it serves you, think about giving your imposter a name. Maybe you've got some ideas from a name here. Last week, we had some really amazing names coming through, like Satan and Dave and all sorts of things. So please do share some names for your imposter if there's anything coming to life. And I'd really recommend drawing your imposter. I'm just going to have a look back here at some of the advice you're giving, celebrating things, practice over perfection, therapy. Big fan of therapy, been in psychotherapy for a while. And yeah, it's absolutely life-changing. Talking positively to myself in the mirror. Ask a friend what they like about me. Self-compassion embodied practices, gratitude, interrupting the imposter with a distraction or word so she doesn't go on a rant. Brilliant. Making a list of accomplishments and revisiting it. Using the ABCDE model from positive psychology to dispute my negative thoughts. Diane, I'm going to have to look that up. I knew we were going to get some absolute magic gold dust from you guys. Creating communities. Diane calls her imposter Sauron from Lord of the Rings. Brilliant. So yeah, if anyone's got any ideas for what they might call the shitty committee or the imposter, please feel free to share. We can strengthen it, as some of you guys talked about. List out your achievements, ask for strengths-based feedback, find ways to play in your area of genius, your strengths, the things that motivate, that energize you, that you enjoy doing. Because when we operate in that zone, we can have much fewer experiences of the imposter syndrome because we feel that much more assured. And I don't know about anybody else, but I've got a smile folder on my computer. Every time I get a nice piece of feedback or a good comment or whatever, I either email it to myself or I just file it away. And when I'm having a bad day, I can just look back at that smile folder and give myself a huge pat on the back and create a big old smile literally on my face. And the last kind of tip I want to share from me is all about reframing. And you talked about this ABC model sounds brilliant. I love to get more details about that. But really recognizing this thing called spotlight syndrome. We think that because we're, in our own heads, and actually we're a bit self-absorbed as an individual sometimes, we think that people are there watching our film with a box of popcorn and being like, ha ha ha, see, Alice got demoted, ha ha ha, that post got low likes, ha ha ha, what an idiot, right? But the reality is that everybody else is so much in their own heads, worrying about their own spots and fuck-ups and demotions and redundancies, that they can't worry too much or long about ours. So when we recognize that we're not actually in a spotlight, the spotlight's only of our own making, then we can start to move away from it and put it in perspective. Which is my final tip that I want to share with you, which is a technique I call Take 5. Maybe some of you have heard about it. And this is all about, particularly when things go wrong, particularly when we're kind of catastrophizing about something or other, which we can sometimes do because of our imposter. It's to take a step back and to ask ourselves to take 5. Ask yourself, will this thing still matter in 5 minutes? Maybe. 5 hours? Probably a bit less. 5 days? Forgotten about it. 5 years? 5, and so on and so on. The reality is there will be some things that happen in your life that you're going to be thinking about in 50 years' time, right? But it's not the fact that there was a typo in an email or you stumbled over your words in a presentation. That is not going to be the thing that you remember. It's not going to be that you didn't get that job or you didn't get the promotion or you didn't speak up in that meeting or whatever thing you're giving yourself a hard time about. So try the Take 5 technique for when you start to go down that rabbit hole. Now, thank you so much for joining today. In case you want to bring more of this magic, help a badass unicorn to spread her magic, I work with some amazing clients, as I talked about, to deliver workshops like this. So if anybody's interested in talking to me about how Badass Unicorn could support you and your business, please feel free to email me at badassunicorn.co.uk. I'm also running a free workshop in February called Turbocharge Your Confidence. So I'm just going to pull up the chat now, and you can sign up using the link that I've just shared in the chat. You can sign up for this 60-minute power hour to skyrocket your self-belief. So if you've enjoyed today and you would like a bit more of this, then come and join me there. And it would be fantastic to connect with you guys on social. I'm at Badass Unicorn on Instagram and at Alistair Haar on LinkedIn. And like I said, I'd love to offer anyone who shares about this workshop today, tagging myself and L&D Shakers, one of you will win a free 60-minute one-to-one coaching session with me. So please get involved on social media, and I'll look forward to working with one of you on a one-to-one coaching session. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop you, I'm just going to check the time here. Yeah, I'm going to pop you for the last 3 minutes into a breakout room, and I would love for you to just talk about, is there anything that you've taken away particularly from today? And is there anything that you'd like to do differently? Just enjoy an open conversation on the topic with your fellow Shakers. I'm going to pop you in there now, and I hope you enjoy it. And I will see you in, I'll end these in 3 minutes. Enjoy your breakouts, everybody. Welcome back. Did you have a good conversation?
Yeah, it was really nice.
Oh, brilliant. Would love to hear, if you're comfortable, just remembering that we're recording, anything that you'd be comfortable to share from that you get from today's session.
That my imposter syndrome is not always negative, that it does have some benefits of showing me, giving me empathy. It protects me. And also I love the exercise with basically finding, what triggers my crappy committee. And
Happy committee. Yay, I love it.
and what I tell myself and the things that I should say to myself, to be more kind to myself, basically.
Brilliant. Lovely. Thank you. I recognize that we're on the hour now, so if anybody needs to dash off, then do feel free. But if anybody would like to share anything else, please just top off mute. I'm going to put those links into the chat for you again. So you've got the feedback form there. I'd love to get the feedback of all of you amazing, brilliant L&D folks. So please feel free to leave that for me. You've got the link to my free course and my handles on social media for anybody that'd like to stay in touch.
Oh, I think Alice lost connection or something. Or it's just me? No, it's her.
Hear her. It's frozen.
Yes, she froze. Well, we're at the end of, or the top of the hour anyways. She shared all of the links and all of the cool stuff in the chat. I also shared a resource I remember that some of you probably know from positive psychology as well, the saboteurs. I took the test and it was very interesting to see all the saboteurs coming, to say hello. So maybe you want to explore that one as well. I think she dropped, I'm going to tell her all of the thank yous and all of the positivity that you guys are sharing in the chat. This was awesome. Thanks for joining. Enjoy the rest of your evening or your day, and see you hopefully very, very, very soon in one of our other events. And don't forget to hug yourselves and love yourselves and give yourselves a big pat on the back and a big well done, well done, well done, well done. Lots of love, everyone. Take
Bye,
care.
everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.